everybody, and today we are going to go through our first demo. We are going to do a fun little project for self-introductions. So first thing we're going to do is open up Photoshop. I already have Photoshop open here, but what I'm going to do is show you where to find it. If you are on a Mac, you should be able to find it through the Launchpad. If you're on through a PC, you can just search for it. And normally what I do is I click the Launchpad and I click search and I search for Photoshop. Now, this looks a little different than our normal Photoshop icon. Normally it's blue and it looks a lot like this. This one is the beta one, so it's the one that I have installed on my machine, so that's the one we're going to use today. Okay, so when you open it up, this is kind of what it's going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and get this all sorted out. There's a couple of different ways to open your images in Photoshop. You can either get the image and drag it right into the icon, or the way we're going to do it today is we're going to say File, Open. And I have mine living on my desktop in my Digital Skills folder. We're going to use this Photoshop 1 and self-introduction. On this one, we have a nice brick wall and a photo of me. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select both of those and say open. So Photoshop has opened them both. I wonder... I don't know if I can get rid of that one. That's gonna be troublesome, I think. But what we're gonna do is we have my image right there, and you can kind of toggle between them. So this is gonna be your workspace. And what the idea is for this project is we're gonna take the photo of me and we are gonna merge it with this photo of the background. Couple things as we get started. If you'll notice, there's a menu at the very top, and this menu has pretty much everything you need that's going to help you kind of create what you want to create. And then you have this part right here. This is a toolbar. This toolbar may change depending on how you have your things set up. And you can always reset your window under Window and Workspace. Now personally, I like the Essentials workspace. You can use whichever one is best for you. I'm just going to go ahead and reset it. This is normally the default when you open up Photoshop. So at the side here, we have our main toolbar. This is kind of where we have some really fun things that we can use to manipulate photos and make them look the way we want them to look. As you hover over them, it's going to tell you kind of what they are. And mine isn't playing right away, but normally if you hover over them, they'll show you what they do. And you can watch a quick video and it'll give you a tutorial. The other thing you want to notice here too is if you have one of these that have like a little arrow right in the right hand corner, that means that there are more options living under that specific icon. So for example, if I come over here to our lasso tool, and if I click and hold, you will see that there are several other choices that live underneath that tool. And you can change it to whatever you want to use. So you can use the polygonal lasso tool, the magnetic lasso tool, etc. And so several of these have that. The eyedropper has several choices. So if you don't see the one that you want, it's always good to kind of look underneath these and see if you can find the one that you need. So what we have here is we have the move tool. This is one that kind of helps us move things around. We have a selection tool. This is mainly for things that are like rectangles or ellipticals or something like that. When you do this, you get this wonderful marching ants is what we call them. And that's basically a selection. And normally if you have a selection like that, you can do pretty much anything in that selection and it'll keep it straight to that selection. So if I wanted to go on there and color it in, you can do that. So I'm going to go select, deselect. The next thing over here that we see is an object selection tool. So you can select a certain object on your page. The crop tool, we normally try and use the quick selection tool. The crop tool is just as it says. You can crop your picture however you would like to crop it. If you hit shift, it'll keep the constraints. We're not going to need to crop ours today, so we're just going to leave it be. The one below it is what is called a frame tool. So this is a great option for adding photos in. We have an eyedropper tool. This one's a really fun one. You can take the eyedropper tool and you can use it to get the color in the picture. So I can say, oh, I want it to be that color. And then if I do that, that's the color that's going to be what I use. So that's always a fun one to use. Okay. The next one down here is the healing brush tool. This one's kind of fun. A lot of people use this one to kind of get rid of any blemishes and change any things up. And it'll pretty much get rid of anything that you don't want in that picture. I have some snow on my face, so we're going to get rid of those. And it's really great. It normally works really, really well. So that's a fun one to use. It has several different choices that we will go over in this class. That's really we're just going to do an overview today. The next one here is the brush tool. I've used that a few times here, and it's just like a paintbrush. The clone tool will be something that we will learn about also, just not today. The history brush tool kind of brings things back to the original, as you can tell right here. The eraser tool is just as it says, it erases. The paint bucket tool fills out full areas of things with a similar color. The blur tool is something that we'll be working with this semester to learn how to blur and to sharpen things. The dodge tool is a great way to lighten certain areas of your photo. This comes from the old photo processing when they used to use dark rooms. This is a tool that came out during that time and has been used often since then. Below it, you'll find the burn tool. The burn tool is also kind of interesting because this one, instead of making things lighter, it's going to make it darker. So, and then you have the sponge tool. Below that, even further, you'll find the pen tool. The pen tool is helpful, especially when you're selecting shapes with sharp, rigid edges. The next one is the type tool. We're going to be using this one today. This one is great for, like it says, putting type on your picture. We have a path selection tool, a rectangle tool, which is pretty self-explanatory. This hand tool is amazing. So you can always use the hand tool by clicking on it, and you can move your artboard around so that when you really zoom in there, you can use it to move the picture. Now, the wonderful thing about this is that you can do the very same thing even if you don't have it selected by hitting the space bar. If you hit and hold the space bar, you can move your picture around. This is the same in all Adobe products, and it makes it so much easier. Now I'm zooming out on my trackpad, but you can zoom in and out in a couple of different ways. You can zoom in by clicking down here and changing it right over here. You can zoom in by going to view, zoom in and zoom out. One of the great things to use are these command keys. You'll find them on your Mac or on your PC. Once you kind of get used to them, they become kind of like a second finger. So Command plus and Command minus are, so if you hit Command minus, it's going to get smaller. Command plus is going to get bigger. Those are super helpful in making sure that you can see everything on your board. Okay, so that goes right into the zoom tool that's over here. And that's the last way you can do this is you can click on that, and if you click and drag left and right, you can see that you can zoom in and out. This becomes really super duper helpful. One of the things that I also want you to notice is that there are these little squares called pixels. Pixels are what make up things in Photoshop. It's a little bit different than Illustrator. Illustrator is what we call a vector image. And this is what we call a pixel image. And these individual pixels are what make up your picture. So, okay, down here you can click on that and you can edit your toolbar. Meaning you can add things, you can subtract things, you can move things around. It's best if you kind of leave things the way they are, but if you get to the point that you want to change something up, you can do that right here. Below here is what we call our color tool. There are a couple of different things that you want to make sure that you're aware of. First thing first, there are two different swatches. One is the background and one's the foreground. So the background is the one that's always in the back. The foreground is the one that's on top. And this is also the one that's selected right now. So if I click on that one, if I click on it, then I can choose what kind of color I want. We have a nice color bar. I can put in the hex code right here, or I can change the numbers to create a different color. Now, say now you want to mess with this color and not this one. You can just hit this little toggle, this little bar right here, and those colors will move. So this becomes really helpful when we do things like masking, which we'll learn more about later. All right, then if we go to this side, there are some great tools on this side too. So this is your history. Your history is helpful, and I don't know if it's going to be hidden behind this, but it's helpful to know to go back in time. So that's a good one to use. Over here is what we call our properties tool. So this is where you can kind of change your photo to what you need it. You can change your canvas. You can put in your rulers right over here. You have some guides, which will make things show up really well. Over here you have adjustments. So you can have some presets, or you can use the single adjustments, which is what you might see on yours. These are great to change up your photo to what you would like it to be. And we'll go over those here in a bit. And then down here is our layers panel. Photoshop works on layers, and layers, if you would think about it, is kind of like a stack of papers on your desk. Whatever's on the bottom is your first layer, and then you can build on top of it. So if I were to create another layer, just like I did, I can, let's see, if I go on here, and I'll use the paintbrush tool, and I'll make a circle. Now this circle, if you look over here, is on its own layer. Kind of think of it as like an onion skin. If I were to take this layer and drop it underneath the background layer, we're going to make a background copy. If I took this layer and dropped it below the copy, see, it will just disappear. If I took the background copy and I changed the opacity of it, you may see that picture start coming back. There it is. So basically what you're doing is you're just building layers upon layers. So what you're doing is you're changing the photo, you're adding to it, but you're adding it in layers. And so it helps you kind of create something that you want without really hurting your picture. It's always a good idea to make a background copy. That way you always have your original. It's just a good practice. And then you can leave that one locked. That's what that lock right there means. Now, the eyeball right here hides it. So you can have it showing or you can hide it. And that can be really helpful if you're not sure if that one's going to look good. You can toggle it off and on and decide if you want to keep it or not. Another part of this too is that you have some blending modes. So if you've worked with any kind of other Adobe product, you'll probably notice these. But as you kind of go through them, they can manipulate your photo in a way that you may or may not like. And it could add something fun to your photo. This is a great way to change your photo to be something really neat by adding and subtracting. That one's pretty interesting, isn't it? So that's a really interesting one to use. Again, opacity is right over here. You can make your opacity and also fill. So there are a lot of great choices here. And we'll be working with that more as we go along. Now, when you're done with something or you don't want it anymore, if you select it, meaning that it's highlighted, you can just hit the trash can right down here and it'll say, are you sure you want to do it? And you say yes. And it'll delete it for you. The one right next to it is the plus. This is if you want to add a layer on there. You can either add a plain layer or you can duplicate a layer by clicking and dragging it into there. In addition, you can also create a folder, create a mask, and put special effects on there. In addition, you can double click on it and you can change this to any word you like. This is really helpful when you get into really complicated projects that you're using so many layers that you really need to know where things are. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So the idea of this project is we are going to take this picture of me. I'm going to see if I can close this out. We are going to take this picture of me and we are going to cut me out of this picture and add me into this picture. And then we're going to make them to where that they look like they belong together. Obviously, this one was taken in the most recent snow, and this is taken inside. So there's a couple of ways to kind of do this. So the idea is that we want to cut me out of this picture. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to select me. So when we do that, we want to go over here to the selection tool. So there are some options here. We have an object selection tool, we have a quick selection tool, or the magic wand tool. Another choice we have is the lasso tool, which basically you go and you do this, and that becomes your selection. We have the polygonal lasso tool, which is fun. This one works great if you're doing something like a Coke bottle or something that's really rigid. But as you notice, I am not rigid. You have to kind of go around all these little spots. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose kind of the easiest selection tool for this project, and we're going to use the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool is kind of neat because it notices where those pixels are, where those different colors are, and it'll mainly choose it for you. So I'm going to start up here with my hair. And I'm not going to worry too much about this corner. I'll show you here in a minute how to fix that. So as I kind of highlight myself, I'm going to kind of keep going. And I'm going to choose my shoulders and my sweater. Now, over here we had an oopsie. And it chose the wrong space. Well, we can easily fix that. Up here, if you notice, your toolbar changed. And we can say we want to subtract from the selection. So we're going to click on that one and we're going to subtract that part. Now, now look what it did. So we're going to try and add. Now this is really going to be difficult. Hair in general is probably one of the most difficult things to select and mask. So right now, I have a pretty good selection of what I have, but I really kind of want to refine it a little bit. I want to make sure that the edge is where I want it to be. So the easiest way to do that is to go over here and go select and mask. Now this gives you a much different view of what you're looking at. So the way it shows is that the parts that are selected you can see right through, and the things that are not selected are red. Over here you can change them to look different. I love the idea of having the red. I just feel like it's easier to look at. You can change the opacity of that if you'd like and see what it's going to look like. And then there are several options here to kind of make this look the way you want it to look. So what I really want to do is do an object aware. Just for this one. I want to say I want to do the smart radius, and what that's going to do is kind of going to find my edge for me. Smoothing is going to smooth out that edge. If I'm going to make that a little darker so we can see. It's going to smooth out my edge if it's not quite smooth. The feather is going to, of course, feather out those edges. But there's some choices there. So I think the main part here that I'm having some concerns about is, of course, this hair. It's so crazy looking. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to kind of fix that up a little bit. So if you look here, there is this one here, a Refine Edge Brush tool. This is a great one to use for hair. So we're going to go ahead and click on that one. And we're kind of just going to go along the edge here. So I'm going to start down here. And let's see what it does. And so what it does is it kind of looks at the pixels and it makes a decision for you. Now when we go and switch it over, we may decide that we want to change that a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make a smaller brush so that it can really find those edges for me. So that one looks a lot better to me. So over here, I think I want to subtract right here. So we're going to go and do that. So this is a great tool just for hair because it really does find that edge for you. And it makes it so that it's not so rigid. Sometimes, especially if you're adding two photos together, it can look really unnatural when the photo is got a really rigid edge. So what we want to do here is make sure that we don't have that going on. There are parts that can be rigid, like, you know, you like the sweater or something like that. But things like hair are not something normally that's just straight. Okay, so if we look here, I think that looks a lot better. We have a much better edge. We're going to do that one a little bit more. The other ones here are this paintbrush tool. This is basically you can go in and paint the areas that you want to add to your selection. Oops. Well, that's not quite the one we wanted. This one over here is the brush tool. So you have some other selection tools there that you can use. All right, I'm liking that. I think that that looks pretty good. So I'm going to say, okay, now the marching ants are still around there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say image or layer, new, new layer via cut. Well, actually, I'm going to show you an easier way to do this. Now, this is automatically kind of like cut out. And if you notice, if you hover over it, it's automatically got the scissors. So there's a couple of ways. You have this right here. You can go edit, copy, and then come over here to the other one and go edit, paste. There I am. Or you can click on it and you can drag it into that one right there. That works that way too. Or you can go to layer via copy. And then what that does is that gives me just the one part that I can copy and paste over. So there's a couple different ways to do it. Okay, so here I am. Now I'm going to use my move tool, and you can just move yourself around. It's kind of a cool thing. If you notice there I am. There's my background and there's my foreground. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of my background. And this one's locked. Okay, so right away I noticed, man, I took this selfie and it's kind of got me cut off. So when I place myself on here, I'm going to really have to be kind of strategic about where I want to place myself. So I can take my photo and I can kind of change it. The best way to do that is to go to Edit, Transform, and you can scale or rotate or skew. Or you can just go Command T and you'll notice that it brings up a bounding box. And with that bounding box, you can click on the corners and you can drag yourself around and kind of place yourself where you like. And there I am. Now I do notice that we have a little bit cut off here. For the purposes of this, we're not going to worry about that. So it looks pretty good. It doesn't look too terribly bad. But there are some things that aren't just quite right. The color on this and this don't quite match. And so what we want to do is kind of play with it a little bit. So if we go over here we're going to start with the background. I'm going to go over here to this thing called Curves. Curves is a fun tool to use. If you click on it, you will get this thing called a histogram. And in this histogram, this is kind of what your picture looks like digitally. So with this, you can move the sliders, and you'll notice as you move them, things change. You can grab these little edges and you can move those and things may change. Or you could even click on that line and it creates a curve that you can change. You can even not stop there. You can create another curve. So those are some really neat things to do with that. The other thing that you can look at here is if you look under RGB. Now remember, RGB stands for red, green, and blue. Those are the three colors that mainly make up a digital photo. So you can choose to make it change all of the colors, or you can choose to specifically change a color in itself. So say now I want red. I could take all of that red out, or I could add more red in. I kind of like the red, so I think I'm going to add just a little bit more in there. Now I can do the same thing for green. And I can do different thing for blue. And what you're basically just wanting to do is make it to where they kind of look like they match each other. A lot of people use this kind of color grading for photography, for anything that they're working on, but it's a good way to kind of match up or make things look a certain way that you want them to look. So that's curves. Curves is a great one to use. It's a great property to change. Now, if you look here in your layers panel, when I started making that, I was clicked on the background copy. And so the curves popped right above it. So if I click the eyeball button, it's going to turn that off. And you can see it's a pretty big difference. Now the other one I may decide to use, I kind of like the idea. It's not quite there yet. All right. Well, we will wait on that. So the other one we want to do is we want to change me. I mean, is there some things we can change on that? So let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and click on curves. Now on curves, I feel like I'm quite yellow on this. So I kind of want to make it to where I'm not so yellow. Now this is going to affect just about everything under that layer. Now if you only want to affect your specific layer, you can click on that and go to Image, Adjustments, and your curves is right there. And if you notice, so we can go ahead and change the RGB panel on this. If you notice, when you do that, it's going to just be on that one layer. So it's a great way to change things. Okay, so some other choices here are hue and saturation. This one's kind of fun. Like if you do it on your whole thing, which is what's going to happen here, you can kind of move these sliders and change the color of your entire photo. That one can be a lot of fun. The one right below it is saturation, and this is going to either saturate your color or desaturate it. It's still color photo, but you can choose to have it less or more. And then of course lightness and darkness, that's just adding white or adding black. The other fun thing down here is called colorize. And so you can colorize your entire photo to be whatever color you have here, or a selection for that matter. But we are not going to, I'm not going to use that one, so I'm just going to go ahead and trash it. Another one here is levels. Levels is a lot like curves, and you can use the slider. The one right at the edge is going to be your darks. This one here is going to be your lights. And this one here is going to be your midtones. So that's a great one to use. Color balance is a lot like the RGB. This one you'll notice a lot is used actually in several different applications, but what you can do is really balance out your color here. You can make things cooler or warmer. If it's too green, you can put a little purple in it. If it's too yellow, you can add a little blue, make it cooler. But it's a great way of making sure that these two pictures match together. Another nice thing you could do with the background is we could add a little filter and blur it a little bit. So if we're up here on the filters, this is kind of a fun one to do. There's a blur, and we can just blur it a little bit. The blur, filter, blur. We'll maybe blur it a little bit more. I'm not seeing that filter show up on there. Gaussian blur is kind of a fun one, and you can just add just a little bit of blur to that, and it'll help differentiate the back from the front a little bit. But I would say keep it very light. It doesn't take very much. All right, good. So to me, these two pictures look like they kind of mix together. I think that they work well together, and they make sense. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to use the type tool to put a little type on here. So if you notice, once you click on the type tool, your cursor turns to a type. So then we're going to go ahead and click on here. And you'll notice that sometimes it automatically gives you some information. And also, if you notice up here, your toolbar changes. And over here, you now have a layer, type layer on here. We're going to pull that type layer to the top. So, I have it as Montserrat. Looks like it's that mint green. That was the last thing I used. I think I want to change that. I think I want to go to white. I think that's going to show up best. And in this, I'm going to type. I'm going to put in my name. Now there's a couple of different things you can do here. So you can highlight it by double clicking on it, and you can change your size right there. And you can change your font. I kind of like that font. I think it's working out really well. And I can use the move tool to kind of move it where I want it. Now the other thing that you can do is you can hit that transform key again, so Command T, and you can actually just make it bigger, like by pulling it. This is a great way to transform it. So, and if I want to change it, I can just double click back in there, and I can create something like this. Even. You can change the justification on there. So maybe I want it to be down here. And maybe I'll add another set in here. And I'm going to go over here back to type. And I'm going to just type in instructor. And I might want to just change that a little bit up too. Maybe I just want that to be light. Light might be hard to see, but we'll see. And maybe also make it a little bit smaller. So I'm going to hit Command T and bring it down. And in yours, you can do whatever you feel is best. So I think that we're going to kind of stick with that a little bit. So I think that that looks pretty good. I can see my name really well. It doesn't have any problems. If you notice, as I'm pulling this around, there are these guides that are popping up. Guides are great to help line things up. So for example, I have the word instructor. I want to line it up with the end of my name. And those guides just lock it right into place. It's a great way of making sure that things line up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have our picture. We're ready to roll. So we're going to go ahead and save as. And I'm going to keep mine in my same folder with my instruction, and I'm just going to put my name on there. And that's how I would want yours to be laid out too. And we're going to say, okay, now this is great as a Photoshop file, but what we really need to do is export it into a flattened file that you can use anywhere. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to go to File, And we're going to export as. It's going to take a minute. If you notice, here it is. We're not going to, so a PNG is something that you would have a transparent background. We don't want that. We're going to want a JPEG for this. And you'll notice that the color changes pretty dramatically. So we're going to stick with that. This is a pretty high resolution one. If you notice, it's 7200 pixels by 5200 pixels. You can change that by changing the image size over here, or even just changing the quality. Either way. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit export. And if you notice, it pops up the name that you've already saved it as. And it's going to say .jpg. And that makes it into a JPEG. Personally, I'm going to save mine back into that folder so that I have it available. And then if I close this out and open up my digital skills folder, I can go in and show you that now I have my ChristinaMillard.jpg. I have my ChristinaMillard.psd, which is my Photoshop file. But my JPEG has worked out pretty well. So this is what we're going to be working on today as far as getting one of these of yourself so you can introduce yourself to the class. So the project is pretty easy, not too difficult, but be sure to keep this video open and it should help you if you come across any questions or concerns. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Good luck.